working on the cables for the rudder control. Started on the right hand side and disconnected the front tie-in, and then a cable runs back to the rear controls, and I have this one all completely installed. Initially I'd started working on this, and this is where sitting down and thinking through the process is important, because I started with pulling both parts out to build this on the table. The cable has to run through the guides right down there, and because of that, only one end can be installed on the table and the other end has to be installed in place. So on this one I installed this back piece secondary in place here, working on the passenger rudder control attachment point. So we have the attachment point, we have the thimble. The thimble slides through the hole and goes around. And then in prep, as you're doing this, it's important to remember to put all the pieces on that are going to be inside of the cable before you make the loop and put the sleeve in place. So I have a piece of the 1/4 inch heat shrink tube. I decided not to use electrical tape. I wanted to use heat shrink to make it much cleaner. So small piece, a larger piece that will go over the sleeve. Thimble's in place. We put the Nico sleeve, which is a press sleeve, inside. Run the cable through, approximate location where it needs to bend. So we have the thimble in place, the cable's roped around it to keep the curve where it needs to be. There's a small amount of tail on this side, and the rest extends out. Once I swage it into place, the heat shrink will go over the top, the larger piece, and then it'll be heat shrunk, and then the smaller piece will go over the tail and then heat shrink to the cable. So that is where we're at. So you can just make sure that's where it needs to be. So the 3/32 cabling with this Nico sleeve requires 2 swages, so 1 and 2. When you start on these, you start on the one that's closest to the loop, and then you do the one on the outside, and you're doing 2. When you're doing 3, which is required for larger cabling, you do 1 in the middle, 1 on the inside, the closest inside, and then the outside. And there's the swage. So the cable runs around the thimble. It's nice and tight. It's not going to come out. It's not loose. The sleeve is there with 2 swages, 2 compressions, small tail hanging off the end. Then I'll grab the heat gun and we will shrink it up. So this heat shrink tubing shrinks about half its size. So that's why I'm using the 2 pieces. that is the fit. So this is the first end here. Now we'll go install it in place and do the other end. All right, so we're gonna run the cable up through. And slide so I've got a small tail here. Clevis is in place. Cable's tighter in the thimble. Because this up in the front, the clevis attachment up front is twist on, I left this unhooked so that it would be able to spin and not get bound and twisted up. The rudder and brake cables are all installed. There's a few more steps to complete the installation, but that requires that the rudder be in place and that the pedals be adjusted so that the cables can be cut to their final length. But you can see that with the toe brakes, and then the sheathing runs down both sides. There's the rudder cables connected to the passenger controls. And then the black sheathing on the outside runs back. That side you can see the black sheathing runs into the port. And that section right there, you can see the cable on the outside coming from the passenger brakes will tie in right here with two sleeves, and then I'll have that heat shrunk on top, and then they run back in to the brake lever. So when the brakes are applied, whether the toe brakes or the passenger heel brakes, it will pull this lever forward, which compresses the brake cylinder, and that actuates the brakes.